to Wake the Bear Radio with your host, Brandon Johnson, Chris Hurst, and Ron Powers. The roar is on. Yes, Wake the Bear Radio. We are just really excited. This is the last day of 2023. What a day and what a year. But we're really excited. We have a lot to cover. We are actually going to be covering the whole past year of all the wins and big stories that have come out. And so this should be a really action-packed, information-packed, but hopefully very encouraging.
We do want to say Happy New Year to everybody. And knowing that we're entering 2024, that there are good things ahead for us. And as we leave the past behind, we really have had a lot of victories. And sometimes it's easy to get caught in the swirl of the current events and the oh no's. But when we reflect, and that's the goal of tonight, is to reflect, we have a lot to be thankful for.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, I just wanted to put up a psalm here. Psalm 149:6 says, "May the praise of God be on their mouths, a double-edged sword in their hands." And it's a whole psalm about praising God. And I really believe that, we have to take some time to stop. We're in the middle of a battle, or it's in a war, and stop and just continue to praise God for the wins and give him thanks for the wins. Because there was a lot of battles that felt like they were lost, but there was major wins. And I love the title that you gave tonight's show, Ron, the many MAGA victories of 2023. And I do believe that we're going to see a major shift, in the coming year, 2024. I think we have seen a major shift in 2023, but I feel like 2024, it's kind of ominous. It's kind of looming. And I just get the feeling like 2023 set up what we're going to see in 24. And I do truly believe that the cabal is on the run. They are scared that all of their plans are not working. And, unfortunately, when people are really scared, they try even more crazy things. So we kind of have to be ready in 2024 for the most crazy things to come. But we trust in the Lord who fights the battles for us, and I love that song, "This is how I fight my battles." It's all about worshiping God. And that's the way we fight. We fight by remembering the good things, being thankful, praising God for those good things, and we will actually see victory. And so, that's why I think tonight is so important for us to go through the year and just enumerate the wins, all the wins that happened this year.
Yeah, and we've spoken before about that. This coming election in 2024 is a zero-sum game, and that we are in an information war. We are actually in war right now. And when you are in long-term war, you have to know when to push forward hard and stay in the fight, and when to take that quick break to refresh and get the right perspective. And so when you feel like there's a loss of a battle or something overwhelming is coming, remember how many battles did the Patriots in the Revolutionary War, how many did they actually win? And it's the end of the game that's the most important. And just know there is a lot going on under the waterline. So yes, it is a zero-sum game. There's only going to be one winner, and we know it's a dark versus light. But all you need is one little candle, and the light disappears.
Amen. Yep. That's right. That's right.
I agree.
Speaking of the light, we had the light of the world. We celebrated a very famous birthday, and that was the birth of our Lord Jesus. It's the day we've chosen to celebrate, which is December 25th. Not that it actually happened on that day, but we need to have a date to celebrate. And so that we did. How was your Christmas? We haven't had a show last week because it was actually on Christmas. It's the first show that we haven't done since our existence, over 2 years now, about 2.5 years. And we have, that was the first time. And so how was your Christmas?
Mine was fantastic. I spent Christmas morning with my wife and daughter, as I always do, presents under the tree, the traditional thing. I went over to my brother-in-law's house, my wife's brother. I had some really great time. It was overall just a wonderful, relaxing time, just to refresh and to renew and just to remember remember what we're fighting for. I think, to remember the family and the gospel, and people having the freedom to hear the gospel and preach the gospel. Those are some of the things we're fighting for.
Yeah, and mine was fabulous too, Ron. Thank you for asking. I was with grandchildren and in Arizona, so it was not a white Christmas. It was a sunny and beautiful Christmas, but there is something about children that reminds you of the wonder. And it's not just the mystery of what's under the tree. It's the wonder of the goodness of God, the wonder of the greatest gift of all, the wonder of the season, the wonder of this story that we're in, that although we talk a lot about this fight for America, we're in a bigger story. That's a narrative within the great cosmic meta narrative called God's greatest story, when he sent Jesus to defeat the devil, and he put all the enemy under his feet, and now it's our turn to enforce that victory.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we had a great Christmas. I spent time with both sides of our family, my wife's side and then my side, and we've done that every year since we've been married. So over 30 years, we've been doing this two-sided thing, and it's good. It's been a little easier in recent years. One takes the Christmas Eve, the other one takes Christmas. So instead of trying to squeeze them both in on the same day, I did have a Christmas card. I saw this and it really resonated with me. And it's so I just want to wish a Merry Christmas, America, and that's the top one where you see the red counties, and then Happy Holidays to the rest of you. And we want to wish you both people for and against the same. So anyway,
Yeah.
just thought I'd send that out via
That's hilarious.
the Bear.
I had one kind of win I wanted to say, and you guys are familiar with this, that, this last year we had 3 groups of people within our church or our network of people take the biblical citizenship class, like 3 different groups of 30 people going through it. And, I've just seen a major shift in our county, Christians becoming active, what we've been talking about, patriots becoming Christians and Christians becoming patriots. I've seen a lot of Christian friends of mine becoming patriots and learning about the founding fathers and what are, the principles of our Constitution. So, and I noticed too, that what's also kind of connected to that is the Republican Assembly, the Republican Party, and then a bunch of people that are like mildly Christian, but are learning more about their roots. And while they learn more about their roots, they're becoming more passionate about Christ themselves. So it's been a real win in that area. And Chris is, knows this because she has been a part of the central committee for the GOP. Out of this last year, we had probably 13 people that are loosely connected to that group of people step in to play a role in the Republican Central Committee. So that's a big MAGA win, because those people are all patriots. They're not rhinos. They're people that are saying, listen, I want to see this party changed and protected. And one of the major things that the Republican Party has been talking about was getting rid of natural marriage and getting rid of pro-choice and pro-life out of their platform. And I'm like, heck no, I'm going to be a part of stopping that from happening, because that's what makes us. Those are 2 of the major things that makes us very different than the other party. So I know those are wins, both personal, but also county wins,
Yeah, I think that's a great example of one of the things that, as we work forward in changing this nation, we got to do it with integrity. And so one of the things that what you're bringing up is that the GOP platform is thinking, well, that will give me more diversity and more votes in certain demographics. And I just want to encourage us that the ends does not justify the means.
Right.
That we have got to stay on character with integrity, that we don't need to shift some basic premises that we started out with. They are strong, they are good, and anytime we shift away from that, we're going into shaky ground. We're going into a foundation that is not going to lead us into a good place. So again, the ends does not justify the means. That's a lot of what we see in Congress right now, is that there's a lot of conniving and cheating and deceit. And even in various parties, they think, well, if I get the end that I think is good, it's okay to lie. It's okay to cheat. It's okay to deceive. It's okay to manipulate. And this year, 2024, I would like us all to go through an open door of transparency. And one of the biggest things is, let's not have all these secrets anymore, all these secret handshakes and secret societies, secret slush funds, secret black ops situations in the CIA. If we were a government that had open books that people could see, apart from real national security, obviously, then I think that there would be a unification in both parties.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think transparency. I've just reading history. I have yet to find a real story where somebody compromised and to get more, and it worked out good. It always comes at a cost. It always comes at a cost, you know.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, the devil's the greatest quid pro quoer there is. He lures you into something with Bats's eyelashes, and then suddenly you realize you're in a spider web, and you can't get out.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's jump right in. There is a lot to cover. This was a great year. I mean, this was a year that we were on with StreamYard, and we did shows. You know, the year before we were actually in the studio. We didn't have as much web presence. I mean, we had cameras set up in the studio, but we really focused in on this. So starting, let's just start January 3rd, our first show. We had big focus on Kevin McCarthy. He's trying to insert himself as the speakership of the, and the MAGA Republicans were giving him a hard time. Not necessarily a
King
hard
of the
time.
rhinos.
They were calling him out for what he was. You're a rhino. And if you want our vote, we're going to hold you to the fire on some principled items. And so they went, 15 rounds?
Yeah, they did. He was elected on 15 rounds. I think that it was the most drama in government that we saw all year. So if I were to put a title on that first week, they were in there for 4 days battling it out, long hours, and it was quite entertaining to watch as an outsider about what was going on. And we know that Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert, they were kind of leading the opposition. And then, I mean, even Donald Trump was brought up as a suggested candidate for Speaker of the House. And then he was taken off, and there was so much interesting drama. So I want to put this as the most dramatic moment in our Congress all year long.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I would say also what's interesting about that is that, a lot of the Democrats were saying, oh, look at the Republicans. They're fighting amongst themselves and they don't know what they're about. And I'm like, no, this is what happens when principled men and women have debate about what they want to see happen in their government. The Democrats have no principle. So they just, as long as we're in power, that's all we care about. And I thought it was a very great demonstration of what the founding fathers actually envisioned that the Congress would be like, is they would be fighting it through. They would argue it out. They would really not just go along to get along. They would actually, based on principle and on facts, they would hold each other accountable. And that's the key, is we need a government that's held accountable.
Yeah,
and remember why McCarthy got elected was because he made certain promises to those that were holding out. And they were waiting and waiting, and they pressed him into a corner and said, you have got to promise this list. And they handed him a list of things, and he finally conceded and said, yes, I will push for those with my integrity. I will make this go forward. And then there was a unanimous vote for Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, 9 months later, he didn't do any of those things, and they removed him. Talk about man, just that's a victory right there to me. We're starting off with, they held him, they gave him a list of accountability, and then he didn't do it, and then they got rid of him. And then of course he quit later, right? He quit, and so
yeah, it just showed his true intentions. If I can't be the quarterback, I think even Nancy Pelosi called him out, or someone compared, at least she stayed with the team, but and then the following week, January 10th, we covered more of it as more was developing, and that's where they put those those requirements down. January 18th, our third show, Trump was trapping the deep state with Joe Biden as the Judas goat. What we were showing there was that the more things that Joe Biden was doing, he was setting himself for his own traps, because he was accusing Donald Trump of certain things, pushing for things. And it's like, you don't want to go there. You don't want to go there. And then January 24th was actually a pretty good, just more exposure happening with Joe Biden. The classified documents, his taxes now.
I call that the biggest red pill of the year, because that was really, I think for us, it was the beginning of showing and demonstrating the not just is there a two-tiered justice system on the outside of the government, but everybody could see that with the the biggest picture that I remember is Biden's Corvette and these boxes in his garage in Delaware, kind of with the grease stains on the concrete. It's like, there seems to be a two-tier justice system, as there are classified documents that were obviously not allowed by before Biden was president, versus Trump going with the FBI raid in Mar-a-Lago, where he was very much given the right as an exiting president to have certain classified documents. So that was my biggest red pill. I think that went across broad spectrum, that everybody began to see something in our government was fishy.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and then what was really ramping up at that time, in the second month of January and then into February, was the Ukraine war, and the talk of giving tanks, supplying tanks directly to Ukraine to fight Russia, and then of course we find out, a year later, that 400,000 men have been lost in Ukraine in this war with Russia, and we went into multiple reviews of why this was a bad idea. It just felt like the military-industrial complex, the perpetual war machine, as Vivek Ramaswamy likes to call it, was just the media just pumping it out just to get people to give money to Ukraine, and making Putin this horrible. I mean, he is, he's not a great guy, but they, misrepresenting, I think, a lot of what was going on there, and just pouring money into a country to secure the border of Ukraine when we're not even securing our own borders. So that was a big deal, starting in the February.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think too, we got to see just how classless Zelensky was as he visited the Congress in his green T-shirt and his sweatpants, and how many people just kowtowed to him. It was such a mystery, as though he was a national hero, and that he was getting attention that just seemed so undeserving.
Yeah. It just showed how sold out politicians have become, with the laundering and stuff, as we'll cover later in the year. But, that was, I think, our first step in indirectly being involved in that war. Before, we were kind of hands off, saying, well, we support you. But now it's like we're actually giving arms against Russia, which, Russia's a major power. And so that was, I think, an escalation, definitely. And of course, once that happens and people start looking into it, you gotta make some distractions. In the following week, February 8th, we did the Chinese spy balloon and Hunter's Biden's ties to the Ukrainian biolabs. That kind of came out. And so that was very interesting.
Yeah, I just want to call that the strangest thing of the year. was the Chinese spy balloon. That whole story was
Yeah.
weird as they followed it across the northwestern United States. And I mean, there were lots of memes that got an opportunity to be shown during that time, but it just felt like we all were like paralyzed by a balloon.
Yeah. I know. I mean, the ultimate example of, look there, squirrel. I mean, it's like a balloon, you know, like all the little kids, they stare up when a balloon goes into the sky, and it seemed very similar to that. Also that week too, just showed how dark the Grammys were. They had the Sam Smith's demonic, total
Oh
satanic,
yeah.
Grammy performance that week. So it's like, we're looking at the balloon, and then all of a sudden you see this just absolute darkness, and I don't know, you're more into the prayer warrior bit there, Chris, but it seemed like the altars were being set up at that Grammy Awards, just opening up something, because it was dark.
Yeah,
Even
and it's
people
in our face now, isn't it? As they show who the elites in Hollywood are worshiping and giving their ritual admonition and praise to.
Yeah. And of course that's right in the neighborhood, a week later, the Twitter is in front of Congress having to answer. Congress is now asking some tough questions, pointing the finger like, hey, what are you guys up to? It looks like you have downplayed Hunter Biden's laptop. Anyone that said that was real, they were taken off. That's a conspiracy, and so they were being called out on the carpet for that one. And so they really played that one. Yeah, I remember that one too, because they didn't let off easy. They really hammered those Twitter execs, So my hat's off to Elon,
Yeah.
and
Now,
we'll cover
no,
him
was this
more.
before the purchase? This is before the purchase, right? It hadn't yet been purchased.
I think he already did it, and he was allowing, because the Twitter files were starting to come out.
Okay. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The Twitter files were coming out. And what was neat about that was that they had key, very liberal reporters reporting that this the Twitter
Rolling
had,
Stone magazine.
Yeah, that was a
Rolling
key
Stone.
shift, wasn't it? In a lot of the information war was that's when Matt Taibbi and some of the others began
Schellenberger.
actually doing their own personal research, and we got to see some things we hadn't seen before. And I'd like to say, as far as biggest impact, I think that when Elon purchased Twitter, something happened for me. It was suddenly Twitter became a resource for me that I really wasn't able to use as a researcher that much, unless I wanted to just see the blue side. But now, and if you go out there now, it has a very good search engine. If you go to the search structure, it allows you to look, put in a subject matter, and it will pull up both sides of the issue from various accounts. And it's really an exciting platform now.
Yeah, it is. It is. And big changes, that would be the biggest change. And we covered it a bunch of weeks in the future of this date, just how big an impact it was this year. I would say that is probably one of the biggest impacts of the whole entire fight between good and evil, is having Twitter, which was used for evil, now more neutral and even being used for good. And one man happens to be the richest in the world, or one of them, had to buy it out. But it also destroyed that argument that people said, oh, that's a conspiracy. They didn't do shadow banning. They didn't do, and those Twitter files came out, and they showed literal proof behind the curtain. What the algorithms that were written and stuff, they specifically said, Ted Cruz, we want you to downplay his post. And there were a couple other conservatives, and then just showing how they were literally taken off. And everyone's saying that, and like liberal or neutral people are like, I don't believe that at all, So it really came out. So that was a good
I think
one.
of guys like clandestine who was taken off when he pointed out that there were like 16 bioweapons labs on the border of Ukraine and Russia. Yeah, and in Ukraine. And so when Putin had actually said, one of the reasons we're going in is to secure those weapons labs, and the reason that we're going to do that is what we know they're there because we built them back during the day, in the days, and they're being, they're not secured. And so, clandestine was taken off of Twitter for exposing all of that. Now he's back up. And, one of the things that was interesting about the debate and the discussion in the House committee was they said to these guys, Twitter execs, which one of you went to medical school? And did you go to no, none of them went to medical school, but they are banning like the most prolific virologist and cardiologist in the world, Dr. Peter McCullough. They banned him from Twitter, and he is like the most peer-reviewed, published cardiologist in the world, and they banned him. See, and it just came very clear that there was rules for thee, but not for me, and just the censorship. That was how wicked that censorship was. So.
And do you find it interesting that, that's February 14th, we covered that, and there was a lot of attention on that. And 1 week later, all of a sudden there's this thing about, East Palestine, Ohio, with the train wreck and all the chemicals that spilled. And there was a lot of focus in on that. And of course, Biden administration, they were, I think, in Ukraine Ukraine, Kiev at the time, or went there after it happened. They didn't even visit Ohio. So there was just a very terrible thing on the Biden administration's part, not coming to the aid.
Zero. And there's a pattern here, and we'll talk later about Maui and how little the Biden administration did for Maui, but how little they're doing for a place in America, but they're doing all of this work for a different country somewhere across the globe. That just shows you the globalistic mindset of this administration. They care more about their purposes, in other places in the world than they care about the people who they are supposed to be serving. But of course, Biden's stuck his finger in the chest of that guy and told him, I don't work for you. And that's become very, very clear that he doesn't work for us. And interesting, one of the things I'm showing here too, is that this is our actual Wake the Bear Radio website. It has all the past shows, so you can go watch them. If any one of them you wanted to review, you just go to, type in Wake the Bear Radio, and you can go to our website, and all of our shows are all listed here. And Ron has done a fantastic job of keeping these all up to date, all with memes. And so I'm just showing that off for a little bit here. It's pretty good work, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very easy to find a show, and sometimes the picture helps. You just click on that, and I'll take you to that page itself, where you can get an audio or a video, stream it, whatever. And so, absolutely. But it was interesting in that cycle there. The focus on the investigation, Twitter, and then boom, that happens. The train. It's like changed the news cycle, and then a week later, people are waking up. And I think
they are waking up. Let me just make a comment about that too, because not only was Biden out of the country, but the transgender Pete Buttigieg, I don't know if he was still off on paternity or maternity. I don't know whether thinks he's the mother or the father, but whether he's off on leave. But it just goes to show you that he just wasn't able to make a strong presence there that made the people there in East Palestine, Ohio, feel comfortable. They felt abandoned. They were angry, and it was a nonpartisan thing. And it also was the beginning of several train derailments and
that was a big deal.
Factory situations. So I don't know whether it was like a beta test or what it was, but the chemicals just happened to go out right where the river was, and they dumped into the river, just those cars. And then it was the water source all downhill, downstream. And then we saw those fish die. And I mean, it was not a good time for Ohio, and there was no leadership available.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
And,
think what
it's going to be a food source too, coming
yes,
in the years ahead.
yeah, there was like 100 different food places that had burnt down. One of them had a plane crash into it. I mean, all kinds of just bizarre, you know,
Mhm.
things that happened to the food sources. And yeah, so that was a big deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's helped us as patriots begin to go, wait a minute, we need to take care of our supply lines. Something's going on with our supply lines.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, a lot of people were waking up. I mean, the celebrities, I think the next week we found like Woody Harrelson on SNL dropping major red pills, about the COVID narrative. And Hollywood, they were pushing it so hard, get your shot, get your shot. And here you had somebody, and that's actually what SNL was all about. They always were on the edge, almost taboo. And so it was nice to see they actually did go on the edge, because the common narrative was support, COVID, the jab. And so you had, I think, Harrelson, if I remember right, it's been a while, but he was just
Yeah.
tearing it
He was
apart.
railing on it. He was like, let's just, I had this whole idea for a show, and it was all about, let's just say that all the world's elites got together and made everybody stay home and take their drugs. It was like, and he did it in such a way that he kind of slowly sneaked it in. You weren't sure what he was talking about. And then you finally figured out, and everyone went, oh, and
Yeah.
that's a classic. I mean, that's clip. And I say this over and over again. Saturday Night Live has obviously a long time ago ceased to be relevant, because they would only parody the right. They would never parody the left, and the left had so much material to parody, so much material to make jokes about, and they just let it go. And they would have been funny if they would have just gone back with how it used to be, where they would just make fun of both sides, and they just would not do it. So
Yeah.
night
Definitely.
shows, I mean, Jimmy Kimmel, all of them, they just lost their humor. This was where we saw, but this whole show was about the win that some of the celebrities were waking up. I think of Chappelle. I can't remember his first name, but he got on there and just started talking about it. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's a new show out right now. Roseanne and Tim. Now I'm blanking out on his last name. It did Tool Time.
Tim. Yeah, I can't think of his name.
Allen.
Tim Allen. Yeah.
Tim Allen. Yeah, the two are have a show together now. They outdid. It was a morning show. I think they outdid The View. So that was just like this past week. So yeah, they're both conservatives. They both agreed to do something together. Riley Gaines is going to be kind of a regular on Roseanne's show. And so she's coming back, hopefully with a vengeance. I've heard some good things. Her and I think Tucker, it was a week or so ago. So yeah, celebrities are, and if those celebrities get a lot of support, then Hollywood's going to say, I guess we know where the country's at, and
she's not holding back either. I mean, she talks a lot about MK Ultra. She was part of that program, and she talks about satanic ritual abuse and what she saw in Hollywood. So she is not one that is kind of tiptoe in the tulips, and she's no different than she's ever been. She's bold in body, but her voice is strong, and it's clear, and it is full of accuracy. So I think it's a good voice to have. So that's going to be like a regular show. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what it's looking like. Yeah, from the posts I'm seeing. So I mean, you know how Hollywood is. They're money driven, and somebody says, hey, if people are going to watch this show, we can do advertising with it.
Well, I bet it's not brought to you by Pfizer.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh, well, the following week, Trump went to CPAC. That was the beginning of March, and that had a big crowds, a lot of people, a lot of clips. Trump is getting more bold as people are waking up, seeing these things. There's just so much ammunition given to him. So that was a strong week. So we covered that, CPAC.
Yeah, and that was kind of, remember how early Trump actually announced his candidacy? He was the first candidate in the Republican the National Republican Party to do that. And CPAC is when we began to see some of the other front runners come out of the woodworks. That's where we saw, we definitely saw Ron DeSantis, and we saw Nikki Haley begin to make some comments. The funny thing about CPAC is they try to give a united front. So all the players were there and on stage, but they hadn't quite gotten formed what they weren't about and how they were different from one another. So CPAC is when we saw all the players begin to come out on stage.
Didn't some of them get heckled by the crowd themselves, though? Yeah, so I guess they didn't get the memo. So they called a spade, and they called out some. I remember some of those things, which I thought was really encouraging. It's like, okay, the party is not asleep, or the people.
That was a trend we saw all last year. I mean, I even think when Trump was up campaigning and he had Lindsey Graham up there, and they just booed him the whole time. They wouldn't even booed him as a rhino, and he's like, he gave Lindsey Graham a chance to get booed by the whole part, his whole constituency. So yeah, so we're these are wins that we're seeing. We're definitely seeing some wins. There was a loss that came with the bankrupt of some of the banks, but I think that was kind of a shakeup. It'll just kind of make us aware of how tenuous the financial systems are in our state and in our nation. The Silicon Valley Bank, one of the largest bank failures in history, happened at that time. And what was happening right during that time was the exposure of the J6 videos just starting to come out. And the select committee was, causing a bunch of deception, right? Remember that? They were just like only selecting, the select committee was only selecting certain videos to show. And it was a complete garbage, but I think the history of, it's constant, this whole thing. Well, look here, not here, look here, not here. I don't know what you guys took from the bank disruption there.
Well, I think go on, Chris.
Well, for me, I began to reconsider where my money was, not just at vulnerable banks, but I know that we have seen quite a few near bankruptcies or trouble in major banks, Chase Bank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. There have been quite a few of what we would call some of our national strong banks that have had some shaky times. And even a couple of weeks ago, there was rumor that the Federal Reserve was going to go into default because of our national debt, and that there would be some massive closures. So I think it was the beginning of people being aware of, hey, I need to think about where my money is, because what used to be secure is no longer secure. And I think that's a good idea. We all need to know that they only keep 10% of all of our money, and they are working everything else off of our money. They've taken our money and they're making their investments. So if they go belly up, they don't have our money.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of closures. I was just hearing Dr. Kirk Elliott share about that. And just this year alone, they've had over 2,000 bank branches closed. And the year before, they had quite a few too, over 1,000. So they're definitely been closing the last couple of years. I think since 2020. Surprise, right? But yeah, and that video footage was the first round that Tucker had a bunch, and he only shared a little bit, but it got the shaman off within days. The guy with the horns.
Yes.
And it just showed just how absurd that narrative from the Unselect Committee portrayed, that these guys are kicking down doors and doing all this stuff. And it just showed that quite the opposite, officers escorting and checking, oh, this door's locked. Oh, okay, I won't go there. Let's say a prayer for the officers. God bless them. All that stuff came out, and it was so opposite of what they were saying. So it was the first, a crack in the dam of that story for at least, the normies. And so,
yeah, it went from showing only the violent stuff to showing, oh, the people were walking through and they were escorted. They stayed inside. They picked things up. The The
Look at
people,
that.
it
Yeah.
just showed, and it just showed like, that the presentation of the J6 committee was completely one-sided, and and everybody knows it, and and then of course, like you said, Jacob Chansley was actually escorted through, and they actually opened the doors for him and let him in, and they showed the video, and then, like you said, the next day he got off. But if you remember, it was just very little. There was very little that was shown, and then I think what happened is Tucker went silent for a while. You remember that?
Yeah, he was
There was like,
still employed by Fox News.
Yeah.
And
Probably
so
muzzled them.
he did have some things, although he had the singular right, I think, to bring forward the story. He was going through the material, but he didn't leave Fox News until May of last year. And so I believe he was probably making some plans, or he was waiting for his exit. But I think he saw some handwriting on the wall, and he was having to decide, am I staying or am I going?
Yeah, that was a major win, I believe, the release of those tapes. So I consider that one of the major wins of 2023. We should probably keep moving on. We're about 40 minutes in, and we're about a fourth of the year in.
let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next week, Trump, can he be jailed? So we talked about that. And we also talked about, why is Tucker so quiet, just as you mentioned. So it was like we had all this footage, didn't get shown. The week after, the Trump momentum was building. That rally at Waco, it was really people were really starting to see, I think after seeing these things happen, the J6 videos release, so people are excited. And so there's this momentum. As we're getting out of winter and going into the spring, Trump's his momentum is growing. And then we did an analysis on April 4th. We called it Trump's Passion Week. Play off of the Passion Week, where Jesus went through lots of trials before he actually ultimately was crucified. But we looked at the similarities that the opponent, the deep state in this case with Trump, they literally break their own rules to get him down, right? I mean, they bend the rules, they break the rules, false narratives, false confessions, false witnesses, things like that. And so we were just looking at the similarities. Jesus was falsely accused. You threatened to tear down the temple. You said you'll tear it down, and you just, et cetera, et cetera. They had their trial, at night or the Sabbath. I can't remember that one, just all kinds of things just to get them. We got to get them. We'll break our rules. And so we saw that. And then, if you don't have
I want
any
to say one thing about that too. We often make a comparison, about what the deep state is willing to do against Trump and how similar the point is not that Trump is similar to Jesus. The point is that the devil is the same every time. He takes, the saints of the past, and he does the wicked things over and over again. And this is what they're willing to do to Trump, and who is not part of them. And, so that, people like to say, oh, see, you're making Trump into Jesus. No, we're not. We're not saying there's nobody that compares to Jesus. But when you take a man who's fighting for something righteous, and sometimes you make analogies to how the evil uses the same tactics it used against Christ. So against the Lord and against his,
that's true.
Yeah, Psalm 2 says against the Lord and against his anointed, right? So the Bible says that the devil and the nations rage against the Lord and against his anointed one and his saints. So
yeah. Good clarification. Thank you. And then the following week, April 11th, where the war drums are beating, we called it. It was the news cycle. They were starting to push Ukraine more. The war is escalating, but they also started bringing in Taiwan. We were hearing speculation about China. China was doing some things, the flying zones and things like that, and had their eye on Taiwan. And we're like, wow, now we got a war in Ukraine and Taiwan. Can the U.S. actually handle both of those? So, things are still starting to heat up. They haven't eased up. Yeah. And then we did see an uptick in violence. We covered the next week. We called it a mad world, where things are just heating up, the violence within the country and outside the country. So, but then we moved to The Tale of Two Networks. That was a very interesting, I don't know if it happened exactly the same week, but two top people from two totally opposite news agencies. You had Tucker Carlson removed, and I believe he was removed for telling too much truth. And then you had Don Lemon, who told so many lies, I think people stopped watching him, that his ratings went down so low. For telling too little truth, he got let off. And so both of these guys were major players for their news agencies, and they both were released.
And isn't it interesting that Tucker was released and he was the Fox's #1 commentator watched.
Yeah.
He had more views
#1
than
show.
anyone else on Fox, but they let him go. So that you could see that there is a bigger agenda behind them other than ratings.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely
they
was
care more
odd.
about their ideology. They want to control the narrative. And we're finding out how many rhinos are actually in control of the Democratic. I mean the GOP. How many rhinos are in control of the media. And that really CNN. We found out that Fox is really just controlled opposition.
Yeah.
We'll let you say a certain amount of truth, but don't say that. Don't expose the overall arching plans of the cabal and of the deep state.
And once they're released from that control, I mean, look how much power they have now. I mean, Don Lemon is tearing it up. It's all about Don Lemon. We're getting so much amazing stuff. Oh, wrong guy. That's right. It's Tucker. Don who? Don Lemon's gone. I haven't heard anything about him. But Tucker, man, he is just on fire. I mean, even the debates they had when they had the Republican National Committee debates, they had a few, I don't know, 2 million people watch. They had 25 million people watch Tucker's interview with Donald Trump on the same night.
That just makes my heart happy.
and it rose to like 218 million views.
That's what it was. Yeah, it was way beyond
250 million views. So, if it wasn't the same people watching over and over again, you reached more than half, 2/3 of the nation there.
Yeah, and instead of like a 12-minute commentary, he's doing 1 to 1.5 hour deep dives into issues that he is really curious about and wants to ask questions about with no censorship.
Yeah, so it was a great thing letting him go.
That is probably one of the biggest wins. I mean, I would say Tucker Carlson leaving Fox is one of the biggest wins of 2023. And just exposing the wickedness, and now he's unleashed. Like, he's talking about JFK, he's talking about UFOs, and he is going deep into stuff. He is going and talking to the police chief's son that day on J6. He's talking to General McGregor about the war in Ukraine. He is going and talking about all kinds of topics. And then, of course, later, we will get into that later, but guys like, Alex Jones got back on. You've got Joe Rogan has the highest viewership of any person on the internet. And they're talking about all of these subjects that were taboo. And Joe Rogan's talking about Jesus. He's talking about bringing people on and talking about how, Jesus Christ in the Bible is the greatest conspiracy that's actually true. And he's going, he's like, what the heck? Things are just totally shifting in the internet around these shifts. And I mean, to me, those are some of the greatest wins of 2023.
Yep.
Very encouraging. Absolutely encouraging. I mean, if you think about a year and a half ago where we were at and now where we're at now, my goodness, things are setting up quite favorably. So I'm really encouraged by this. Well, let's keep moving on. There wasn't a whole lot, the beginning of May, we said Mayday, Mayday, a play on the words. We just did the news. The next week, the flood of crazy. They talked about the coronation of Charles, which it was kind of a nothing burger. I think, I don't know if a lot of people like Charles. I know that I just watched The Crown, they finished their last season, 6 seasons. And it's the history of Queen Elizabeth from when she was young, very young to the very end almost. And Charles just wasn't portrayed that well, but not portrayed that well. They portrayed him quite well. It's just the kind of guy he is. He's a globalist, New World Order. I really lost a lot of respect for the Crown with him. So
yeah, and he's not just a average globalist. He is at the very top of the elite, and many people think he is ruling from behind the scenes in the Luciferian Brotherhood.
Wouldn't surprise me. So I didn't like the way he treated, Diana personally. She went through a lot, his unfaithfulness, just all kinds of things. But the immigrants, we talked about the flood of immigrants. That was back in May. Nothing's let up. I mean, we are still by the thousands. They're coming in every week. And so that is definitely coming more and more into play even as we speak. So it's not something that went away.
I just find, how little, how few Republicans there are that are actually speaking out against this. Like they are explaining why they think that the administration's allowing this to happen, or going into the details of, they're just like ignoring it. Both sides,
Yeah.
just ignoring it. I mean, you got to
Yeah.
go to social media, you got to go to X, you got to go to Twitter, you got to go to YouTube to actually find out, Instagram, TikTok, to find out what's actually going on. You got to have citizen journalists down there on the border telling us what's going on. And so, that's a big deal, but there's got to be a play here that the Patriots are allowing it to happen for a reason. I don't understand it, but.
Well, what's interesting is there are more blue mayors now, blue state mayors, that are having issues with the open borders because they're having to deal with the tens of thousands of immigrants showing up in their cities.
Yeah.
Maybe that's maybe the whole thing is to expose that whole, sanctuary city garbage. Like, you guys talk a big shop about you're all open to, sanctuary cities. And then when you actually, these places are getting flooded, you don't want them in your, you don't want them at Martha's Vineyard. You don't want people in your backyard. You don't want them in your own house. As long as they're far away, you can be a sanctuary city. When they actually in your city, you're like, whoa, wait a second. I mean, who was the governor that was like, okay, we need to reevaluate this? I think it was the governor of New York said, this can't work. This is not working.
No, it can't.
Yeah. It's interesting because the very next week, the middle of May, we did a thing on Tori Say's. She did a release on the whole Hollywood mind control with the CIA and the CAA, just the control. And that's kind of what we're seeing with the whole flood of immigrants, where it's not being covered. It's part of a, mind control where they're, it's not a big deal. It's not, it doesn't really exist and things like that. But, they did do an interview. CNN did an interview with Trump. And do you remember that one? It was an arguing. I mean, forgot her name who did the interview. She wore a white suit, very much like those senators that they all like to wear their white pants suits, and she would just bicker with them saying, that's not true, Mr. President. That's not true. Or, and but he just absolutely
didn't interview at all, was it?
It was an interrogation.
Questions. That's right.
But he dominated it, and he absolutely destroyed CNN because people saw just how bad it was, and he stood his ground. I mean, if it were anybody else, not just Biden, but anybody else, they probably would have crumbled the pressure and he would just come right back. Nope. And he'd finish his sentence, and he said, that's not true. And so I was really impressed with just the stamina that President Trump had in that interview. And he knew he was going into, enemy territory, but he was fully loaded and ready to go, So,
and speaking of the Hollywood mind control, they've done a new re-release of Out of Shadows too. We heard about that at the America Reawakened tour that we were on a few weeks ago.
Yeah, still one of the best movies of that kind I've ever seen. It was just really well done, but it also had enough imagery. It wasn't just a sit-down interviews, imageries of Mike Smith's background and things like that really was enjoyable to watch at the same time. It's disturbing but enjoyable, meaning, we're trained now for clips, and so he did a really good job.
One of the original Red Pill movies, and its sequel that we were able to show at a movie night of Into the Light.
Yeah. And we showed both of those at Convergence Church. Yeah, that was awesome. Okay, one that I overlooked. Go on.
Real quick, I want to say one thing about that. I think those are big wins because Wake the Bear Radio showed 3 or 4 key films to wake up the populace, showing those at Convergence, having our church let us show those films really woke up a lot of people. And so to me, that's a huge win. Again, the movie that Tori Says exposed was called Enjoy the Show. Remember, that was the name of it.
Oh,
Enjoy
that's
the
what it
Show.
was. Yeah.
Enjoy the show. Out of shadows, into the light. The police state. We showed that film, and we showed the 10,000 Mules. Although I think that was 22, right? 10,000 Mules.
I think there are only
2,000 mules. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there was 10,000. They only showed the 2,000 that went 10 times, right? That was the whole
10
thing.
times. Yeah. If you did like 5 or 6 or something like that, it went over 10,000. So, well, the next week, May 23rd, we covered the Durham report, and that was one I had overlooked. I forgot all about that one, but the Durham report came out, and he was very non-biased. He was by the book, they said, and what it showed was that, which we already knew, Trump was clear of any Russia collusion, and he clearly showed that. But also, a conclusion was that the FBI, the DOJ, the Biden and Obama and Hillary Rodham Clinton, they were all guilty of conspiring to overthrow an election and to do a smear campaign. So he not only found President Trump to be clear of these charges, he also found that these other people were definitely in a conspiracy against him. And so that was a great victory. In fact, that's what really laid down the groundwork for saying that was a hoax. And it was proven because of the Durham report.
Yeah. And I think something that was helpful with that, although it was at first disappointing for me, is that it showed patriots there is not going to be this one big thing, and then all of a sudden everything's going to shift and you're going to have your country back. Because I know a lot of people were pointing at the Durham report. They thought when that comes out, things are going to shift. There's going to be arrests. There are going to be indictments.
Yeah.
And we're going to see people walking in the perk walk. And that didn't happen. In fact, it was almost flat to me, not because what he said wasn't well put together, but I think that it had been built up so much that when people thought, oh, this is the time. And so it's a lesson for us to realize, there aren't these heroes that are coming like Trump, like Durham. There are people that are fighting their best on our behalf, but we must do our part. We've got to do our local governance. We've got to think globally, act locally, and we have to get in the show and not stay on the sidelines.
Very good point.
I think that's one of the big things that we learned from 2023 is that, General Flynn, you quoted him, think globally, but act locally. A lot of people are getting involved. They're going to school board meetings. They're getting involved in their school boards. They're getting involved in their local cities. That's where the real battles are going to take place. That's where you're going to really change and shift culture, because the reality is that there's still so many people that are asleep, that are just mindlessly watching MSNBC and CNN. And those people all watched how they rolled out the Durham report, and they rolled it out purposely flat. And they made it flatter than it even was, because they're just basically lying about everything that's coming out. I mean, and there's so much lies, but the good news is that there's now a counterbalance that's exposing the lies. So those people who are in that, kind of that mind warp, brainwashed state, they're kind of starting to wake up, and in a matter of, and that's really what we're dedicated to, is helping wake those people up. So,
yeah. Well, let me package the next three together. We had the May 30th, we had the Great American Comeback, where we talked a lot about Target. Target was the second company to feel the heat of boycotts. Then we had a week of blockbusters. Sound of Freedom, we saw the sneak preview of that. Town Hall with Trump, and the Edward Griffin movie, The Great Awakening. And then then all of a sudden, as a response, you start seeing more indictments against Trump. And so those are about 3 weeks that we had covered. Anything you want to say on those things? I know the boycott was pretty good. It was like, okay, we can do this, no more tucking bathing suits and all that, boy girl confusion. And so I was really proud, and I'm proud to say that I have actually not shopped and purchased anything from Target since their bathroom issue, which was years ago.
I have not.
I'm just like,
and we used to go a couple times a month to Target, and we have not gone once. So,
I know we have one in our
yeah.
town. It'd be very convenient to buy certain things, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, I just can't go there. And then I'm quite, well, why? Why is it so important? I said, you know what? I just don't want my money going to somebody that supports that. When someone else that's holding the good things deserves, my money.
Yeah, if Target came out and publicly apologized for that I would probably go to put Target again. But until that happens, I'm not. They did not handle it well. That they did it. It's they're just succumbing to all this ESG and this equity and inclusion, EI. I can't remember the name of it. Yeah, all of these pressures and
diversity, inclusion, equity, DEI.
Yeah.
Did you hear? Just speaking of DEI, I know that it's just a short digression. That the University of Oklahoma actually removed their DEI department from their school and shut everything down there. There's also one, I believe, in Wisconsin, another school, major university in Wisconsin, that did the same thing. So those of you who are thinking of getting a master's degree in diversity, equity, and inclusion might reconsider, because it might be out of style in about a year.
Yeah, probably. Well, let's move on to the end of June. I'm just Operation Underground Railroad was, part of that sneak preview we saw. Then it finally came out, and that was, Sound of Freedom. And so we covered this, that it was a real hero going in there, and basically they bought it on an island, and set up a sting operation. And I was just really impressed with everything. The movie, Jim Caviezel, and it was a powerful organization. And so, yeah, we had
that was the beginning of Wake the Bear, also our movie nights. And we had it at an outside theater that we had some call-ins, and we held a reception after each of the showings that we hosted to have questions and answers. And people came out of that movie stunned and disturbed. And so it gave people a place to bring their emotions and bring their questions as they maybe for the first time began to get face to face with the reality of child trafficking.
Yeah.
The theater actually had to open up 2 more showings of it because we packed out the one showing they had there. So that was really, and then of course we had the discussion time was fantastic. We got a lot of patriots to sit around and talk and chat and get to know each other, and we kind of created a list of people who were standing against this. And then we even had some local heroes in our neighborhood here help with their organization, the Aruka Project. Heather Good and who else was there?
Laurel Winslow.
Yeah, they came and shared about their local program to combat human trafficking and to help the victims of trafficking come out and to be rehabilitated, and restored.
Yeah, that was a great night. So if you're asking yourself, what can I do? Well, we knew this movie was coming out, so what we did is we just put an email out to people saying, you got to see this movie. It's only going to be played once or twice, and you got to see it. And got some pizza after, and we're gonna, we rented out a little corner of the theater and just kind of had a bunch of tables and chairs and had a live interview. And so it didn't take much. I mean, you don't need to be specialized in anything to do that. And so we were able to do that, and it started a movie night from that point on. By the time we went to July 4th, we had a show called Where There's Smoke, There's Fire. We talked about all the fires that were happening in France. There was a lot of pushback against, this globalist government over in France. But at the same time, we had the peculiar fires in Canada, like thousands of them or hundreds of them started at the same time. I remember we were talking about that. We're like, how does that happen? Because there was no storm there. There was no lightning storms that started that. And so, I suspect foul play, burning away these natural resources or whatever else reason. But,
yeah, it was one of the first times we began to have some discussions about energized weaponry and the use of it possibly by the government or by some nefarious source.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What are those called? WEDs? DEWs. Direct energy weapons.
Direct energy weapons, yeah.
Bidens.
which
And
may
it's
have
interesting
happened in
because
paradise.
most people don't even know about them, and the
They've been
government has
around.
done multiple documentaries on them for like the last 30 years that they have developed this technology. So when we start bringing it up, people go, "Oh, that's conspiracy." But wait, the government's already exposed themselves. They already said they have this technology. The question is it being used for evil and nefarious? And is that, the cause or part of the cause of the Maui fires, the Paradise fires, the fires in Canada, and the fires around the world? And the
Yeah.
answer probably is it probably is. It's probably they're testing this technology out to see if they can do what they want to do with it.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
the CZU fires. We had some here in Santa Cruz that were very odd.
Yeah, you could see they used it in Vietnam. I mean, I remember hearing a guy that was very high up in the military saying, "Yeah, we actually created typhoons and weather control for that." So, as a result of those shows, we did this thing on God's Children Are Not for Sale. We talked about companies that were boycotting other companies that were against children, that were not supportive of children, and how people would boycott actually those companies. And then the next week was Jim Caviezel. He started to get interviewed because of the success of that movie, and as a result, he started dropping some red pills about Q. And so they created this straw man argument against him to try to discredit the movie. Oh, he's a QAnon weirdo. And Jim Caviezel is just saying, hey, some of those things I read, they seem to be coming true. And he was open to it. And so I thought that was a great red pill drop there. And then the next week we did do Aruka Project, which they were there at that movie, but we also gave them a night where they can actually talk about what they do locally. We have a local organization, and how they rebuild and renew and restore young people, mostly young girls that have gone through this sex trafficking or abduction and stuff like that. So, boots on the ground. So that was kind of a value added rather than just pulling news items off of the internet or something. We know these people, they're dear sisters in Christ. And then this one I didn't know much about, the Archers. This one I'm trying to remember that Devin Archer, he had a testimony, and he worked, I think,
He
with
confirmed.
Hunter.
He confirmed everything that Hunter was doing, the nefarious things that Hunter was doing, and the major media companies tried to shut him down and discredit him. And he was a partner with Hunter at times, so he basically gave the truth. I think this is the time that the text messages came out, that the conversations about what was it, Hunter texting people in the Chinese government and the Ukraine government, telling them my father's sitting here right with me, and if we don't get the money, we're
That's right.
it was a bunch of pure straight evidence, and of course the media said there's no evidence, absolutely no evidence that he's done any of this. Like, no, we have text messages, we have bank records, we have emails, we have an entire laptop, we have all the evidence that you would call evidence, and you guys are saying there's no evidence, which is just complete garbage.
And 3 years later, the FBI still has Hunter Biden's laptop in their possession.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, crazy. The next week, where President Trump, he retruthed Dr. Jan Harper Hayes' interview, and that interview with Jan Hayes was, I did a bear pause like within minutes of seeing it. I was just so blown away by some of the things she said. And one of the things she said in that interview was that it's a big mistake that Jack Smith was a prosecutor going after Trump, and he wanted to take him down. And she said that's a big, big mistake of him doing that, because what comes around goes around. And he has opened up the door to go after, Biden, by him doing what he's doing to President Trump. And also, President Trump now has the ability to bring things into evidence, which before he couldn't. And they did. And so now he has the ability to really red pill America. It's like, oh, you want evidence? I got it. It's part of my defense. I have to show it. So I was really impressed with Jan Harper Hayes, and she really confirmed a lot of other things that were really good in that interview.
Yeah, and she was part of Trump's transition team in the early stages of his presidency. And she actually is a foreign correspondent in, I think, England. She's over there, lives over there half the time in America, half the time here. So she was just dropping bombs about, the debt that we were in when it came to England after the Civil War, that we were in a debt, and basically England still financially controls the United States because of that. And basically her, Trump's visit, all the tours that he did when he went around the world and met with all these leaders, and he basically said, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and you're going to be okay with it. And he went to the Vatican, and apparently she said that there was 650 planes of gold that were taken from the Vatican to pay back the debt. There's a bunch of things that were done. And, a lot of these things, we have to trust her word on it. We don't know for sure. And we have to hold, what's the word? Hold lightly until we see confirmation of these things. But the stuff that she is saying is stuff that we've heard from multiple places, from like Patel Patriot, from Rattle Trap, Derek Johnson. She's confirmed a bunch of stuff that we saw with the continuity of government, and what was the other term? Devolution theories.
Evolution.
So yeah, so all of these things, she as a person who is on Trump's transition team is confirming these things.
And also she worked with Department of Defense too. That's so right. I mean, someone that should know these things or could know would be her.
Yeah. So whenever you see a new face, that kind of the new superstar come out on social media that we hadn't seen before, and I'd never heard of her before, you do want to be very discerning. But the fact that President Trump retruthed her, I found very interesting. This past week, she's had a lot of controversy on Twitter, on X, because she was talking about Epstein's flight logs. And she said that well, that Trump went to Epstein Island once, according to the politician that told me. And she had a copy of the flight logs. And immediately, so I don't know if she did this on purpose to get this clarified, that they showed the flight logs, and he went between, I think it was New Hampshire and Palm Beach, Florida, was where he did get on Epstein's flight, but he caught a flight to Florida and then back, I think, the same day. So he was in that, and she got torn apart for about 10 hours on Twitter. And then she came back and said, I want to apologize for making that statement. So this was just a couple of days ago. He was not on Epstein's Island. I didn't see the flight log well enough, and I just shouldn't have trusted this politician who said that. So she got her hands slapped by a lot of people on X. But she should have. But
that's good. It shows
that she wanted, because the Black Book is due to come out. So the flight logs have been out for a long time.
Tomorrow.
We know that in a week or so, the Black Book of Epstein's is supposed to come out. So I honestly think she was maybe doing a little proactive. Let's keep this in the spotlight, because there are lots of powers that be that don't want that Black Book out.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
It could be. I mean,
a selective leak, like it could be like a selective leak when a film comes out and one of the actors gives away something they're not supposed to. And then they go, they get really in trouble from the publishing company, or the film company. And then it's like, but it actually creates drama to keep the eye on the focus. So I don't know.
It also establishes a story that he did not go to the island. And how do you do it? You accidentally, or you say, I think he went to the island because it's what somebody said. And then an overwhelming proof shows, no, that's not the case. So now people will say, ultimately they'll walk away saying, before it even comes out, well, he's not on that list. He's not on that list. So yeah. But the next one, by mid-August, we did our 100th show. It was Give It a Little Time. Yeah, that was awesome. And that was just about when the fire in Maui broke out. and we were talking about J6 and ivermectin, because ivermectin, now there was all these positive articles. I think the CDC now said, yeah, you could take ivermectin, to fight that, COVID. And so it's interesting, because I just got my order of ivermectin a couple of weeks ago. It took me like 6 weeks. I want to buy a bunch because I want to do a deworming or, parasite thing.
Yeah.
And so I bought some, and my mother actually wanted some, and her friends. So I just bought a big thing of it. And anyway, I got it from.
You can get a little flea market stand and probably sell some at the flea market.
Yeah,
I want to take those.
I don't want to get in trouble.
I want to take those articles that
drug
came out. I want to take the articles that came out about ivermectin and take them back to CVS. When my wife went to go get the ivermectin, she had a doctor's prescription to get some, and the CVS pharmacist denied her. I want to take those back and say, I just want to give this to you to show you that you made a decision that was false and wrong, and you denied a doctor's prescription, which I know you have to study a lot to be a pharmacist, but you're not a doctor. And this was prescribed medication that was given to us by a doctor, and you denied it based on lies that you found on the internet and on the media. So
the same thing happened to me. And that was the last time I used CVS pharmacy.
Yeah. That should be illegal, and there should be some ramifications. That was illegal, I think. Absolutely. I think there's a structure there that doctor writes something, some pharmacist doesn't override the doctor. But let's keep moving on as our time is going. A fear campaign was ramping up. There was a lot of fear coming out. They were pushing all the wars. They were pushing this and that. It was probably one of those weeks where we just did the news cycle. And then it was the next week, you had the helm by yourself. We were out of town. I was out of town, and you did a wonderful job, Chris. I really enjoyed it. Was I Love Trump with the I Love Lucy logo. I converted that over to Trump. And but you did a great job just doing the research of why you like Donald Trump and the kind of character he is, the kind of man. Because, you hear a lot of stuff that's not true because, we have a biased media. And so it was really nice just to have you go through and you compared them. That was the other thing. You compared them to the other lineup of the RNC, Vivek and Nikki Haley. And I can't even remember some of the other ones. If you're single digit, I forget your name. Yeah. And so, especially when you compare, you can really see who rises to the top, And so you did a great job looking into each candidate. And it was clear to me that Donald John Trump was the best choice of those. And he's just the best choice right now, period. I mean, I really, the more I learn about the man, I appreciate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So good job, Chris, on that one. So, then the next week we did, fighting time. Yeah. Trump was fighting back. That was, September 5th. Mm-hmm. And just more and more things are being exposed and giving Donald Trump a time. And Donald Trump was bringing him to the rallies saying, did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? With the Bidens and the mayors and all kinds of things that were going on. I'm trying to remember the details of that week. It was but I remember he was fighting hard, and he's getting confident in those rallies about that time. Yeah. And then we did 9/11, September 11th, and we just kind of re-looked at that, kind of went back into yesteryear, and we just went over, why did Building 7 go down at the end of the day? Why was NORAD running exercises, and it just, finding the passports, that were in the plane blows up in the smithereens, and yet those passports are unburned. And it's like, oh, now we know who flew the plane because we happened to find their passports in, 100 tons of rubble. So it was, we covered that.
Yeah. I love the fact that now it's actually acceptable to doubt the details of 9/11, and that it's becoming more and more. I mean, Tucker's covering it. Joe Rogan's covered it. Multiple people have said, hey, we know the event happened, but the official story isn't correct. And there's just too many things wrong with the official story. And so more and more people, and sooner or later, this is all going to completely come out. I loved the fact that, I think maybe we talked about that there was initially like 6 was it 60 or 600 civil engineers that said there's no way that those buildings could have fell that way unless they were detonated, exactly perfect. You can't have an asymmetrical explosion and have a completely symmetrical drop,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
Right.
it just doesn't, it defies logic. And so I just like, this is a win because 40 years ago, I just believed the normal narrative of this whole thing. And I didn't even look at any of the evidence. And then finally someone said to me, well, that was an inside job. You know that, right? I'm like, oh, dude, you're high. You're crazy. You can't believe that. And then he's like, well, just do the research. So I did the research. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's totally right. Like this
Yep.
was this official narrative's BS. It was an inside job, and just a bunch of things that don't make sense. So one of the major things that we do is causing people to check to question the
Look,
narrative. So
yeah, and that narrative is so important because as a person who flies a lot, which I do, it's the whole reason we have TSA. And which just burns me up every time I have to take my shoes off. It's so gross, and act like I'm a criminal and do this in the little machine, and then have someone swipe under my bra to see why did the machine light up. So that's why that 9/11, when we find out, when it comes to court, we need to get rid of that whole TSA program, because that is just more monitoring, more taking away our freedoms.
right,
Yeah.
and they're now wanting to put facial recognition software on every person who flies, take a photo of everybody who goes through, and use facial recognition. I mean, it's all meant for surveillance. And there's even a whole thing on it. One of the FBI agents, it was I think it was Casey, that said, when everything that the American people believe is false, our disinformation campaign will be successful. And that's the CIA. That's supposed to be our guys doing that to us. So
Yeah, the AI, just keep that new book that was co-written by General Flynn about the influence of artificial intelligence is very eye-opening as far as our biometrics and what is being gathered even from our light bulbs in our house, as far as our habits and our facial expressions, so that there is so much that this whole 9/11 started that is we have allowed to perpetrate. And if we don't stand up and say, no, you cannot continue to do this at a level that will stop it, it's going to be China for us.
Yeah, definitely. It's incremental. It's always incremental. And speaking of flying, the next week we did was on 9/19 was, dude, where's my F-35? Do you remember that one? That was a good chuckle. So our military lost an F-35, which is one of the most advanced planes we have, and just lost it, and the pilot ejected out, if I remember right. And so he's like,
yeah, it was on the continental America. I mean, it was down in Alabama. I think it was at Valdosta, Georgia, at Moody Air Force Base. So it wasn't like it was in some foreign country.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know if they ever found it or what, so that one was very interesting. And then, Megyn Kelly took a turn people were saying, did she go full MAGA? I mean, she definitely had a change. She did the interview with President Trump, and she was much, much more civil. Before, I think she was pretty anti,
well, she also said she had vaccine injuries that she had from taking the vax. So she was waking up. Yeah, she in one of her interviews was talking about that. So she's definitely gone through a shift. That's a win. She's a major figurehead in media that, like Tucker, who, if she starts speaking more and more truth, she might have to go to only speaking it on X,
Yeah. And then we went to the end of September, where we had the good, the bad, and the eerily quiet. I remember you came up with that name, Brandon, and I think it was because the news cycle was so slow. We're like, there really isn't any big news story. That means something big is going to happen in the next week or two. That's what I think one of us had said, And then the next week we just talked about some of the people that were kind of taken down, the old guard. Milley was retiring. General Milley, he was one of the what Trump would refer to as the TV generals. There's a set of generals that we believe that are supporting Trump, that are behind the scenes, and then there's the TV ones that are just rank and woke and all that stuff. And so Milley was the kind of the lead guy of that one, and then Feinstein. I guess she finally passed. When it says Feinstein gone, she did pass. She was 90 something years old. I mean, she kind of looked like Frankenstein towards the end. I mean, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, but she was really couldn't control her face, and she was old. And it's like, why are you serving in the Senate? Why are you doing that? You're barely functional, and you keep getting rehired or voted in. And it's like, who keeps voting for people that are barely alive? They're like walking corpses. So, and then Murdoch.
How close our Senate vote is. That's why they cannot afford to let anyone leave and get an imbalance of power in the Senate.
Yeah, it's just horrible. And then Murdoch, which was the Fox News. Did he step down? I can't remember. That was just the news of that, that week. That wasn't too long ago, a couple months back.
Yeah, and I think that Good, Bad, and the Eerily Quiet really was, it was giving a foreshadowing of the October 6th in Israel with Hamas attack.
Yes, and we covered that 4 days later with the time for discernment. When that happens, it's easy to jump to sides. Which side are you, pro-Hamas or anti-Hamas or pro-Israel, and you could see the lineups, and there were a lot of people that supported Hamas because I believe they're anti-Christian. And it seems like, one of the idols of Christianity is Israel. And so it's like, well, anything Christianity supports, we're going to go the opposite. So you had all these people that were, pro Hamas. And then they had that guy doing an interview at college campuses, saying, hey, what people do you think, will execute somebody if you're caught, I can't even remember the things they were talking about. And they're like, oh, that must be, it must be ISIS or something. And they're like, no, that's Hamas. And they're like, really? And so these college students were finding out we're supporting people that stand exactly against what we're for. Oh, if you're LGBT, they can kill you. Who do you think that is? And oh, it's Hamas. They actually have it in their books, to do that. And they're like, really? And so why did they go to that? So it's very interesting how, and so we were just saying, let's use some discernment. Obviously the Hamas, they're terrorists. They've always been that way, but Israel's not always a shining, perfect saint on things either. There's plenty of skeletons, I believe, in their closets. Some of the things. I mean, why was it that the border down, for 7 hours, and even General Michael Flynn had talked about that. Last week I saw him talking about that. Going, it was down for 7 hours, and he says, I know that place. I know there's something weird about that, And he was actually being interviewed by Alex Jones, which blew my mind. That Alex Jones has been restored to a point where he's working with 3-star generals. General Flynn. But General Flynn called it out. He's like, I don't understand that. There's something weird about that. And so it's
he's like, I don't know if BB knew about it or not. I'm not saying that.
But there was a stand down.
There was definitely a stand down given. A stand down order.
Yeah, whether it's Netanyahu or whether it was the Southern Command in Israel. So, and that also started off a series of, you began to give some short bear pauses on the history of Jews and some things about Israel. So if they aren't on our regularly at 1 hour show, but if you go to our website, you'll find. How many did you end up doing in that series, Ron?
I did 7, and I got 1 more to do, just 1 more. But you could see the top ones. There's Understanding Israel in These Times, Part 7. So Israel's Anglos or Celto-Saxons. But I talk about the Old Jerusalem, the New Jerusalem. There's a lot of verses, and people have this image that Israel is going to be invaded by Gog and Magog. But yet, if you look at the description of Israel, it was like the land of unwalled villages living in peace and security. It's like, well, that's not really happening over there. So can you put the two together, or at least at this point? Talked about the Khazars, a whole kingdom that
Right.
converted over, defining the terms. What's a Semite? When you find out that, almost all of your Eastern European Yiddish speaking Jews are of Khazar descent, Turkish Mongolian descent, then you find, well, they're not even descendants of Shem, which is where you get Semite, Shemite, things like that. So we covered a lot of things. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in that, it can really change or stretch you. We've been taught a lot of things, and
And I think the bottom line is, in Israel, just like in America, there are black hats and there are white hats. There is a struggle going on. There's a Luciferian deep state, as we know through Mossad and through Epstein's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, that her father was head of Mossad. So we know that there isn't an easy solution to this. We also know that that God does call us to that He loves the line of Israel. And so we just have to look at it with open eyes and prayerfully, and we want to bless what God is doing, and not get on board to something that might be deep state.
Yeah. We did learn a lot through that whole thing with Israel, which is there's enemies, and when you have enemies within, what about our southern border? And so we talked about that by mid-October. We're talking about, there's a lot of similarities. There's an enemy within, and that's what we have. And I don't want to say that every immigrant coming over is an enemy, but in that mix, just like you said, there's white hats, there's black hats all together, wheat and the tares. If you're a terrorist and you want to get into this country, that's how you're going to do it. So I'm not saying that an immigrant is a terrorist, but there definitely is the route for terrorism to go through. They're going to walk through with the crowd,
Yeah, and also there's currently a plan in place that has been talked about with the White House of possibly when the things in Israel with Hamas settle down, that those wanting to leave could come to either Western Europe or America. So just be aware that this story is in the making.
Yeah. By Halloween, October 31st, we did Winds of Change. McCarthy's out, and we had the MAGA Mike Johnson in as speaker, and that was kind of miraculous, to be honest. I was dumbfounded when that happened. I was like, I cannot believe they got somebody so pro-Trump, so pro-MAGA, and he is the Speaker of the House. So I felt like that was the hand of God, in my opinion. That was a huge win for me. In fact, I have that as our icon of this week's broadcast. I have Mike Johnson there. So
yeah, that's a huge win for him to be the second runner up, and then they were going to cancel and start all over. And someone said, why don't we just go to the second person who was on the list? And they went to say him, and they voted yes, and he became the speaker. And that was just powerful. And I mean, he is such a articulate, passionate apologist for Christianity affecting the government. I mean, they attack him on separation of church and state, and he's like, well, the whole phrase isn't even constitutional. It comes from a letter from the Danbury Baptist Association to Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson writes to them, don't worry, the government will not be controlling churches. And he explains it very well. He knows the facts, that he's a patriot who is very, very well read. And first thing he did is he called the Congress to get on their knees and pray,
Yeah.
And so, and that's huge. Whenever you acknowledge God in this country, it's very clear that whoever, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. And if you acknowledge me before men, he's going to acknowledge us. And so I think he's a rising superstar who is not compromised. I'm obviously, there's so many that are compromised, so it's hard to know, but I believe by faith that he's not, and hope that I'm right. But he is definitely awesome. I mean, in so many ways.
Yeah. Big encouragement. I'm actually low on my battery, so my laptop. So I'm going to move along here. So the next week we did talk more about borders. An open border is essential for color revolution. So we talked about that, giving that warning. The next one is the world through polarized glasses. We talked about the polarization. So many topics in the news. It seems like you're either on this side or this side, and we need to work on a unity. And so we just talked about how polarized, how quick people are. And I have friends on Facebook where they're like, oh, I knew they were going to go that direction because it's just instantly, if you have this type of bumper sticker, then you're going to be on this side of without even research. So, and then by the 21st of November, which is right before Thanksgiving, we had context, lies, and videotape. And that was basically the January 6th tapes. They were newly released, and they were released to the public this time.
That was huge.
That was a huge win. Very encouraging, because the truth's always known when you get to see it, right? It's not being hidden.
Those are available to all of the J6ers.
Yes. I went on. There's a lot there. I went on. You can click on the video, and they have 10-second clips or 1-minute clips, and you can look for yourself. And there's just a big old folder of, and it was awesome. It was just good to know. I didn't go through them all. There's special people that like to do those sort of things. I'll get the highlights from them, but I did go in to check it out. And sure enough, those links are good. And so we went with that. And then the end of November, we had Stay Calm. Anything could happen. And we're just talking about so much stuff coming in, so the news cycle, that anything could happen. And our trust is in God.
Hallelujah.
That's who we need to trust, not what's happening in the news cycle. There's a lot of things that could make you fearful, but we know. I mean, I keep going back to those Kim Clement prophecies, even that one that the last one that was new to me, where he said, Mr. Clark will be sitting with a man named Donald, and you're going to be looking at me right now saying, is this for me? Is this? And he says, yes, I'm talking to you,
Yes,
and you will win that election. And they hadn't even met till earlier this year. And so it couldn't have been the first election, couldn't have been 2020, because they'd never seen each other. And so it was encouraging. So that to me showed, and so many more things. So that's where our trust is in the Lord, and not in what the news cycle is. And so, well, we only had a couple more after that. We're into December this month. Stay focused. Don't be distracted. Mm-hmm. And you had put out a movie. I was out of town at the time, the Police State movie. That was one of the movies. You want to share about that?
Major film. Dinesh D'Souza put it out. You can go and watch it on Salem Now. It is a fantastic film. It actually shows the weaponization of government against Christians, weaponization of government against conservatives, weaponization of government, two-tiered justice system where people who are your average Christian conservative is attacked. They're throwing the book at them. They're invaded. Their homes are being invaded. But if you're a Democrat, none of these things happen to you. So I think that, Dinesh D'Souza is putting out he said never really wanted to produce this film, but because of what we've been seeing happen in America, it looks like it's, communist Russia, Bolshevik revolution type of stuff. And so this needs to get out. People need to be aware of it. And we showed the film, and it was great. It was very well received. We'll show some more films there at Convergence soon. But anyways, anything else, Chris?
No, I just would move on to the following week. We highlighted how Elon was pushing back as he was getting sued by Media Matters. He was pushing back about that they had false claims against Twitter advertising. And so it was good to see that someone with the clout of Elon Musk was going after Media Matters. And if you don't know Media Matters, follow the money, because they are into a lot of nefarious things. They are doing a lot of interference, and they are creating a lot of lawfare that doesn't need to be created.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're funded by George Soros Open Society, big time, one of their major funders of Media Matters. So extremely leftist organization. And I think didn't Elon Musk counter sue them or something because of what they're doing. So we'll see how that plays out.
I'm sure he's got top lawyers for that. And then the last one that we covered was a local Leon Canaro. What is it? Canaro.
Canaro.
Who, yeah, he had done a book on linking autism with vaccines, and it wasn't the jab; it was vaccines in general, and just the poisons that go in them. So it was a good eye opener. Nothing that we hadn't known, but it was nice to see the details. That man did a lot of research, and it was really good. I really enjoyed seeing that. You know, a boots on the ground type of guy who did the research himself, and so it's been a great year. We covered a lot. I know that this is an extremely long, bear paw or episode here. We're at an hour and 40 minutes, so we should probably wrap up. Are there anything that you would like to wrap up with?
Yeah, I know I'm looking forward to going into 2024, and I don't feel like I did last year at this time. I felt like I am so ready to get out of this year, 2022. But 2023, I am intrigued by all the things that have happened. And I know we have a big God. He's up to stuff. And as we cooperate with him, we're going to see great breakthroughs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just go back to Psalm 2. It says, why do the nations conspire? Why do the kings of this earth take their stand against the Lord and against his anointed? The Lord in heaven, it says the Lord in heaven laughs at them. He scoffs at them, that laughs at those rulers that think they're going to enact their wicked plans against him. And so, I just come to that conclusion that, we can laugh at the days ahead because our God is laughing at our enemies, and because he is working on our behalf, and God's kingdom comes and his will be done. And we're going to see it in 2024. I really believe, there's good chances of a lot of chaos coming in 2024. God is in control, and God is on the throne, and we're going to see a big win.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. I agree with you 100% there. I'm looking forward to 2024. I think that is going to be the pivotal year. I think there's a lot. I think Dan Scavino had a perfect meme for it, which I didn't want to show, about a tiger laying down and someone's going to flick his nuts. And you don't do that to a tiger, but I think that's kind of 2024. It's ready to explode in a big way. So anyway, thanks for watching, and we will see you next year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.